Welcome to Kingdom Housewives. This year, we're walking through a special year-long series called Women of the Bible, where each month we explore a new theme and study the lives of women in Scripture who reveal God's faithfulness, wisdom, and power. Each monthly theme in the Women of the Bible series has its own dedicated playlist on Spotify, making it easy to follow along, revisit past episodes, and study each group of women together in one place. Let's dive in and see how God works through the lives of women then and now. Hey, Christ followers, welcome back to Kingdom Housewives Podcast. I'm so glad you're here as we continue our June theme, Courageous Leadership, Women God Raised to Guide, Protect, or Influence His People. Last week, we walked through the life of Deborah, a prophetess, judge, and leader in a chaotic and violent time in Israel's history. And that matters because today we stay in that same world. The book of Judges is not a peaceful book. It's a cycle of rebellion, oppression, and deliverance. It's a time when Scripture itself says everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It is chaotic. It is unstable. And it is often violent. And into the world steps a woman we barely meet, but whose one moment changes everything. Her name is Jael, a woman whose bold and decisive action helped deliver Israel from its enemies. So to set the scene, Israel at this time is under oppression from King Jabin of the Canaanites and his commander, Sisera. Sisera is not a minor figure either. He is described in Judges 4:3 as having 900 chariots of iron, which means overwhelming military dominance, fear across entire regions, and decades of oppression over Israel. So when we meet Jael, we're not meeting her in a neutral world. We are meeting her in a war-scared world. So Jael is identified as a Kenite. The Kenites are important because they're not Canaanites. They are historically connected to Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. That means they are a nomadic clan. They move around a lot. They have historical ties of friendship with Israel. And they are generally seen as neutral or even allied with Israel's people. So Jael is not introduced as an enemy of Israel. She's part of a group that historically lived alongside them peacefully. And the detail matters. Her husband's location also matters. You see, Judges gives a small but important detail. In Judges 4, verse 11, it tells us that Heber, the Kenite, separated from the rest of the Kenites and pitched his tent near Kadesh. So Heber was Jael's husband. And that detail is easy to overlook, but it matters deeply because it means Jael's household was geographically separated. They were not in the central Kenite cluster. They were positioned in a more isolated area. So when Sisera arrives later, he's not walking into a known military camp or allied city. He's walking into what appears to be neutral territory or a nomadic household, a place far from political allegiance, which sets the stage for what he believes is safety. Now remember, Sisera was a commander of King Jabin's army, the Canaanites. And Sisera was fleeing because remember, Israel was defeating them in the war. Remember the war that Deborah led? So Sisera eventually enters Jael's tent. After his army is defeated, Sisera flees on foot and he comes to Jael. Now, why her tent? Because in ancient Near Eastern culture, tents represented hospitality. And hospitality represented protection. And violating hospitality was deeply dishonorable. So Sisera assumes no one will pursue him here. He is safe among neutral people, and he is protected by cultural norms. But we know from reading scripture, he is wrong. But he just doesn't know that yet. So Sisera says in Judges 4:19, he says to Jael, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." That's a simple request, a basic survival. But Jael gives him something else. In Judges 4:19, it reads, "So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him." And that detail is not random. It is deeply meaningful. Milk likely helped induce deeper sleep. I mean, have you ever fed a newborn baby? You know how fast they can go to sleep after they get their tummy full of mom's milk. And milk in ancient nomadic culture is heavier than water. It's more filling, it's more soothing, and contributes to physical relaxation. And the result is immediate. In Judges 4:21, we read, "He was exhausted and fell asleep." Milk also outwardly honors him while disarming him. In hospitality culture, water is a basic need, and milk is generosity and honor. So giving milk instead of water communicates care, abundance, respect, which probably lowers suspicion and increases Sisera's trust in her. Sisera feels honored, probably not endangered. Milk also slows the moment and reinforces safety. Milk takes longer to consume. It creates a pause. It reinforces comfort. It's not rushed. It's restful. And everything in the scene moves towards sleep. The Bible frames it this way. Sisera asks for something simple. Jael gives something richer. What looks like kindness becomes part of his downfall. It reinforces a major theme in Judges. God's deliverance often comes through unexpected means. And this is important. We don't know a whole lot about Jael. Scripture does not give us her personal thoughts or her emotional reasoning or a direct explanation of her motives. We are not told exactly why she acted, but we are told how she is remembered, and that is where the narrative becomes powerful. In the Song of Deborah in Judges 5, Jael is not hidden or minimized. She is honored. In Judges 5:24 says, "Most blessed of women be Jael." In Judges 5:26 through 27 describes her action in strong, poetic terms, portraying her as a decisive in the downfall of Sisera. The tone of the song makes something clear. Jael is celebrated. Her act is seen as deliverance, and she is remembered as part of God's victory. Even though she's not a battlefield leader, she's included in the victory narrative. Now, we might ask ourselves, did Jael know who Sisera was? And while scripture does not explicitly say what Jael knew, it is very possible she understood. Sisera was the commander of Israel's oppressor. He represented brutal control over the region. His name would have been associated with fear and violence, because this was not a hidden war. This was a known oppression over Israel for 20 years. So when Sisera enters her tent, it is very possible that she recognizes the weight of who he is and understands what his presence means. But again, the text does not explicitly state her internal decision-making. What it does show is her decisive action. After Sisera falls asleep, Jael acts. A moment that is quiet in the text, but massive in history. A military commander, exhausted, vulnerable, asleep in perceived safety, is defeated, not on a battlefield, but in a tent by a woman acting alone. No army, no weaponized system, no public recognition, just a decisive act. The bravery decisive act of Jael. And this is where the weight of the story hits. Sisera is not just any man. He's a trained commander, a symbol of oppression, a leader of a feared military force. And Jael approaches him alone. That alone takes courage. Because whatever her reasoning, she is facing a powerful enemy of her people, acting without backup and stepping into a moment with irreversible consequences. This is not passive bravery. This is a decisive courage. Jael reminds us that courage can come in quiet strength. Boldness for God can look different than the world expects, and one decisive act can change the course of history. God always raises leaders in unexpected ways. Her story is not loud, but it's powerful. It happens in a tent, not a battlefield, and yet it shifts the story of a nation. So if you find yourself feeling unseen or underestimated or unsure if your moment matters, Jael's story speaks directly to that place. Because God does not measure impact the way people do. In Psalm 31:24 it says, "Be strong and let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord." Jael's courage saved a nation. And her story reminds us God still works through the unexpected. And sometimes the quietest moments carry the greatest weight in history. Thank you so much for joining me as we learn a little bit more about Jael. And if this episode blessed you, please share and follow the podcast and join us next week as we meet Miriam, a courageous leader who protected and guided God's people through the wilderness. Thank you for joining today. If Kingdom Housewives has blessed you, please like, follow, and subscribe and share this podcast with others. Together, let's continue to glorify God.